Good morning, magical friends. It's Kelly here from Quiet Speculation and Ion, and I am here in Thailand as usual on a cloudy day in this mountain paradise. But that's okay, because we don't need to go outside because we have magic cards. Don't mind the robot arm, that's a secret thing. So, what we have here is my latest care package from Card Kingdom. Not often you get a package addressed to you from the CEO of a major magic company, but today was my lucky day, I guess. So every time a new set comes out, we get one of these guys. We have Card Kingdom mail them to us, and we do our 40 card deck building challenges with these. So I'm not going to take up any time explaining to you what the cards in Hour of Devastation are. You've seen them online, you've read the previews, you've read the full set releases, you've seen all the pros talking about them already. So I haven't had a chance, I just opened this box 2 minutes ago, I haven't had a chance to even sort these out or integrate them with our Amonkhet stuff. So that'll be a few days while I parse out what archetypes I want to build with. Today, I want to show you guys a little surprise they threw into the box. They know how much I like pre-constructed grab-and-go decks. And so, they told me they released two new, sorry, what am I talking about? That number is 3. 1, 2, 3. We'll do a little English counting lesson here too. I've been speaking Thai too much lately. 3 of their newest battle decks. A black-green deck, Swarm of Scars. A blue-green deck, Plow the Sands. And Cold Front, a mono-blue deck. Well, that's very interesting. So I'm going to crack these open. I have no idea what's inside them. There aren't any deck lists or anything. So I'm going to guess that Swarm of Scars is like a -1/-1 counters matters deck. I think Cold Front is going to be something that uses Snowlands or something like that. And a blue-green Plow the Sands deck. I'm going to think this is like one of those blue-green mana acceleration decks, like a ramp deck. But let's see. You know what? I think I know what these two are. Let's bust this open and see what we got. So, get these out of the way. We know what these are. Boring. Not boring. Just kidding. Those look like so much fun. I just haven't had a chance to even think about them. So, as I said before, the battle decks are pre-constructed decks, really inexpensive. I think the retail price is about $9.95. And they have dozens of them in their store specifically. At their new location in Bellevue, they've got a wall of these things. So, you can see, Plow the Sands. Blue and green deck. Battle decks are ready to play. 60 card decks, brewed for fun. Legend tells of a lush oasis, hidden within the sweltering sands, a land of endless bounty. But what dread terrors lurk below the surface? Plow the Sands is a blue-green ramp deck, yeah it is, that puts tons of lands into play, draws fistfuls of cards, and unleashes a crush of sandworms. I think somebody watched my Nissa video from Amonkhet and got some ideas. I'm just kidding, this is a really standard Magic archetype. And by archetype, I mean sort of a known type of deck without any specific cards mentioned, but like blue-green ramp, archetype. Mono-red aggro burn, direct damage, that's an archetype also. Let's zoom out and break this thing open. Now, as a reminder, I often like to turn these into 40 card decks to match up with the way we play Magic at QS. We like 40 card decks. Oh yeah, I already love this deck. We like 40 card decks because they're faster to play, they're more consistent, and you get to see more of what your deck does every game. So, all right, let's get this thing laid out here. Urban Evolution, 5 mana card, draw 3 cards, and you can play an extra land from your hand this turn. How many of these do they put in the deck? They put 3. That is probably the correct number. 3 is correct here because in a 60 card deck, mind you, because this means you're probably not going to draw more than 1, and it's less likely that you draw it in your opening hand than if you play 4. So this card actually gets better and better as the game goes on, but it doesn't really help you get to the point where your deck is doing what it needs to do. So this is a mid-game card that gets you to your end game. So next card on the list, we have Explores. How many lands have you played this turn? 4 Explores. That's a little inside joke for people who played Magic about 5 years ago. Somebody used this card to sort of, I don't want to say cheat, but cheat in a high-level match and didn't get caught. One of my favorite cards of all time. 2 mana, sorcery. You can play an extra land from your hand, and you draw a card. So it's not true card advantage because it doesn't net you an additional card, but it replaces itself by drawing. And it lets you accelerate your mana by a turn if you have the land in your hand. This isn't a card like Rampant Growth or something where you can search out your deck. It just lets you play the ones you have in your hand. But as you can probably tell, this deck draws tons of cards. So playing it out of your hand is great, and it makes the mana costs on these lower. If this let you search for a land and draw a card, I suspect design would have made it cost about 4 mana. Moving along, another one of my favorite cards. Weird coincidence, right? One of my favorite archetypes. It's filled with all of my favorite cards. Coiling Oracle, again, 4 is the correct number here. This card is incredibly powerful. First of all, it's a snake elf druid. If it was only an alligator demon bear cat also, it would be the best creature in Magic. So, 1/1 for 2 mana, as we've discussed, is kind of the number for a utility creature, and that's exactly what we have here. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top card of your library. Actually, technically, you reveal it, so your opponent sees it too. If it's a land, it goes into play. If it's not, it goes into your hand. So, 2 mana helps you get extra lands onto the battlefield, helps you draw cards to fuel your endgame plans. This is an interesting choice. Arborback Stomper has nothing whatsoever to do with the mana acceleration strategy, but it's big. It's a 5/4 for 5 mana, which is baseline a decent cost. 5 power for 5 mana is, like I said, reasonable, especially if you're not playing competitive standard. This is a fine deal. But the 2 things that matter: trample. It's evasion, it pushes through damage. Second, the more important part, you gain 5 life when this comes into play. That's 25% of your starting life total. So if your opponent is a very aggressive deck, and they've been beating you down and beating you down, maybe you've thrown a couple of these in the way of their attackers once they've done their thing of drawing you cards. But cards like Explore and Coiling Oracle let you start casting this on turns 3, 4, sometimes depending on how your hands play out. And the 5 life that early in the game makes it really, really hard to race. So if your opponent's trying to kill you and you're trying to kill them, a big creature with trample that gains you life, they're not going to win that game. So this deck is all about what I call inevitability. If the game goes on long enough, this deck is going to win. No question about it. So cards like this ensure that the game goes long. There's some basic dual lands, mana fixing. Again, they gain you life. These are pretty standard and pretty common. Nothing much to say here. You play 4 because why wouldn't you? Now we've got ourselves some new stuff from Amonkhet. This is a double-sided card. Spring to Mind. Spring to Mind. Clever pun. Spring is in a natural spring, a wellspring, where water comes out of the ground, and it's also a pun in the spring to mind colloquialism. Now, if English isn't your first language, and I have a lot of friends who play Magic for whom English is like their third language, they're not going to understand the pun in this card's name. So that's why I'm really breaking it down, so you understand exactly what's going on. Spring to mind is a colloquial English phrase that means something has come into your head. Like, I can't really think of a good example right now, honestly. I'm in Magic mode, not English mode. But we'll just get back to it. 3 mana for Spring. It's a sorcery. You search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your deck. Remember how I said this would cost 4 mana if it drew you a card? Well, this costs 3 mana and doesn't draw you a card. So hopefully you're getting a sense of what mana costs really are. Part of the reason I'm doing this series is to help people understand the fundamentals of card evaluation. 3 mana to do this effect is 1 mana too much. Cards like Rampant Growth are the exact same effect for 1 green and 1, so net 1 mana fewer. Reason this costs 3 instead of 2 is because it's built onto a second card here. So you're paying the extra mana for the option and the versatility, and that's a concept that Magic players need to understand. Is you pay extra for options because options are extremely, extremely valuable in Magic. I think it was John Finkel, what I think is the greatest player of all time and a real overall stand-up dude. John Finkel said, in the absence of a better decision matrix, choose the line of play that preserves the most options. So that's okay to pay a little extra mana. And this deck doesn't really care. This deck has so much mana that 1 extra for the versatility doesn't matter. Let's turn this around here. 4 mana Instant, draw 2 cards, and Aftermath means you can only cast it from your graveyard, so after you've done that. This helps you get to 6 mana. This helps you use 6 mana. Instant speed is great because you can wait until your opponent's turn is over and use any unused mana to draw some cards. 6 mana to draw 2 cards at instant speed is a garbage deal. You're paying 3 mana per card, which is too much. However, because it's functionally free, as in it doesn't cost you a card, you've already gotten your card out of the spring half of Spring to Mind. This is just, again, a cheap option to sink your mana in the late game. In my previous video, I discussed what a mana sink is. I'll quickly review now. It's in the late game when you've got a ton of lands out and you don't have many cards in your hand. You want ways to use arbitrarily large amounts of mana. And that's exactly what this is. You can sink a ton of mana into it to draw cards. And drawing those cards will help you get more stuff that you can use. So, how many did they choose to put into this deck? They went with the full clip of 4. So this card now, with 4 of them, becomes almost an engine of the deck. Get lands, draw cards. Get lands, draw cards. Getting the lands helps you cast things like Urban Evolution and Arbor Stomper a turn before you normally could. And then as you start rounding out your lands and you start hitting your 5, 6, and 7 lands, you start drawing extra cards, which means you're more likely to draw the next copy of this. Continue, continue, continue. And you're pulling lands out of your deck, which means you're less likely to even draw them. I love that they had the moxie to include all 4 of these cards in the deck. I don't know why I thought they were going to go with 3, but this is a great call. I'm already loving this deck. If you can't tell, I can't shut up about this. This video is going to take forever. But hey, Magic is fun. What better to do with a cloudy, rainy day in the mountains than mess with Magic cards? Anyway, moving along. Shefet Monitor. It's a 6/5 creature for 6 mana. Baseline good deal, as we've said. It cycles for 4 mana, which is really high for a cycling cost, but it's one of those cards that has a trigger built onto its cycling effect. Trigger meaning, when you do this, then do that. So, when you cycle Shefet Monitor, you may search your library for a basic land or a desert, many of which have extremely valuable uses other than making mana. And it goes onto the battlefield untapped, and you draw a card from the cycling. Remember how I said that would cost 4 mana if you put the land into play and drew you a card? That's exactly what this does. And if you don't want to get the land and draw the card, you can pay 6 mana for a 6/5. I love this card. I think, how many did they put in? That's right, full clip of 4 again, because this card does everything you want to do in this deck. I would hate to be Tarkhan right now, because I can't wait to beat him up with giant green and blue monsters again. He hates when I talk about it like that, which is why I do it. So, now we're getting to our top end. I talked about this in the original Nissa video. It's an 8 mana spell. Most decks will never even hit 8 mana. This deck, on the other hand, can hit 8 mana like a punching bag. So, Sandworm Convergence, 8 mana, enchantment. So it sticks around on the battlefield. Creatures with flying can attack you or any of your planeswalkers. Now, I don't think this deck has any planeswalkers, but that means you can't get hit by flying creatures, which is huge, because this deck has no other way of dealing with flyers that I've seen so far. At the beginning of your end step, the end of your turn, you make a 5/5 worm creature token. Did they get the worm? Let's see. Did they put the token in here? I don't think they did, but there's one in my Amon-Ket box, so I can go grab that. How many did they put in? 2. You really don't want this in your opening hand. Having one of these in your opening hand is just like mulliganing to 6 cards, because it's absolutely useless. You're not going to cast it anytime soon. This is your end game. This is your coming over the top, literally, as you can see. And this wins games outright. If they don't remove this enchantment, immediately you're getting a 5/5. If they let it stick around for an extra turn, you've got another 5/5. And most decks can't handle what this card does. So this is why you want to cast things like Urban Evolution, use all of these mana acceleration cards so you can cast these bad boys. I might have gone with 3, but it's a rare, and I know that they try to keep the battle decks accessible, so they show what you can do without spending a ton of money on rares. Top end of the curve, endgame, absolutely crushing finisher. Another card that made its way into my previous deck, Lay Claim. It's 7 mana, it takes anything from your opponent, and now you have it. Pretty simple, and it cycles for 2 mana in case you draw it in the early game or you don't need it for whatever reason. Another top-end, end-game, game-winning card. I'm getting some glare here from the lighting. That's annoying. You'd think by now I'd know how to do these videos, right? Nope. Still make the same mistakes. Alright, Labyrinth Guardian. 2 mana for a 2/3 creature. Now, especially for an uncommon, that's an aggressive cost. So there's probably going to be some sort of downside or additional cost. And in fact, there is, but it's actually almost completely irrelevant. When it becomes a target of a spell, sacrifice it. It dies. So anytime you look at it the wrong way, there it goes. It's an illusion. That's sort of a theme in Magic with the illusion creatures. Whenever they become targeted, like whenever you look at them like a ghost, they disappear, which means they die. However, it's got Embalm, which means when it dies, you can make it come back in the form of a white token creature, and it's still just another 2/3. So this is card advantage pure and simple. It's aggressive, it blocks well for its mana cost, and this will keep you alive in the early game and put on some pressure if your opponent's got a slow hand. Of course, full clip of 4. Great decision to put this card in the deck. This is not an obvious card for inclusion in the archetype, by the way. It has nothing to do with anything your deck is doing, but it fills a hole in your mana curve. So you've got a 2-cost creature here, a 2-drop, a 2-cost spell here, and another 2-cost creature here, which means you can always do something with your mana on the early turns. And in the late game, the Embalm just gives you a way to use your mana more effectively. Moving along, we have Gale Strike. This is just this isn't removal proper, but it's what I would call tempo. It's 3 mana, it's an instant, it returns a tapped creature to its owner's hand. So if your opponent attacks you, bang, Gale Strike, back in your hand, they have to recast it, the creature can't attack until next turn, and you draw a card, which means you keep the velocity of your deck going. So it's not true removal because it doesn't remove the creature forever, but it buys you time. That's why I use the word tempo, same root as temporal manipulation. It's about time. So this card buys you time, and it gets you more options by drawing you a card. We have shock, full clip of 4. Now, we're on to some lands here. Desert. Desert, remember Shefet Monitor? Where's he at? He's down here. You cycle him, you can get this onto the battlefield without even being tapped. Comes straight out from your deck, which means then you can sacrifice it to make a 2/2 zombie creature. So what this really says is pay 4 mana, draw a card, put this land into play, so it's an extra land, then you can pay 3 mana to make another creature. So many options, so versatile, brilliant inclusion in the deck. Curious if they're playing 1, specifically to fetch it out, go get it from your deck with Shefet Monitor, or if they're playing more because they think it's valuable. My guess is I would probably only play 1 in this deck. It's I call those cards silver bullets because you just got one of them and they do a specific job. They're role players. Because when you can search it out with a card that you have 4 of, then it's kind of like playing 5 of these. So how many? Uno, which is Spanish for 1. I don't even know what language I'm speaking anymore. There you go. Utility toolbox kind of card. I wonder what other deserts they have. But we're not there yet. We're on Bounty of the Luxa. It's an enchantment, green, blue, 2, 4 mana. And I talked about this at great length in my Nissa video as well, but I'll give a quick rundown for those who haven't seen it. So, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, which means before you attack, you remove all flood counters from this card. Well, what's a flood counter? Well, that's sort of its own way of marking where it is in this sort of flood cycle. This is meant to represent kind of the way the ancient Egyptians viewed the Nile River, because Amonkhet is sort of based around Egyptian style mythology. So if there are no flood counters on it, you put a flood counter on it, and then you draw a card. If you do have a flood counter on it, you remove that counter and get a green, a blue, and a colorless mana. So it alternates. Draw a card, get some mana. Draw a card, get some mana. This is a very slow card, but it can take over a game. You don't even get the first effect of drawing a card until it's your turn after casting this. So the first turn you cast this, it doesn't even do anything. However, if it's been on the battlefield since turn 3, because you cast Explore on turn 2 to play an extra land, and then you cast this with your 4th land on turn 3, well, now you're really going to start taking over the game. Drawing an extra card every other turn and getting 3 extra mana every other turn is huge. Cast this on turn 3, draw your Flood counter card on turn 4, get 3 extra mana on turn 5, which means easily on turn 5 you're casting Sandworm Convergence. At that point, frankly, it's game over. Even if they can remove Sandworm Convergence, you've still got this powering out extra cards. While they're finding an answer for this, they're getting killed by this. How many? 2. 2 seems correct because you don't really want this in your opening hand, but you don't mind. I would have personally gone with 3, just because I think this card is such an engine and takes over a game. However, like I said with Sandworm Convergence, this is a rare. And Card Kingdom are trying to show you that you don't need tons of rares to make a deck that hits really super hard and plays really well. So I think we're done here. Lands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 islands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 forests, nicely balanced. 4 dual lands. Let's get the camera up there so y'all can see. And 1 utility land. Now, interesting that they didn't choose to put a few extra desert type cards in here to search out with the Shefet monitor and to get extra utility out of your lands, because you're probably going to be playing so many lands. You want to get the most out of them. So, when I do a 40 card rebuild of this, and hey, Card Kingdom, no offense, you know, I just play 40. You guys know that. We talked about that when I came to visit. This is probably the best battle deck I've seen yet. It's so cohesive. Its synergies, the way the different cards all work together, really on point. So, to whomever designed this deck, I tip my hat to you and I say well done. I cannot wait to shuffle this thing up and battle with some giant monsters. So, I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to figure out how to make it into a 40 card deck and get started playing some games of Magic. But this is exciting, exciting, exciting stuff. I think they've just next leveled their battle deck game significantly. I also want to say once more, I love the presentation of these things. They give you tokens on the other side. They explain the decks to you with an indication of the colors, the type of deck, basic example of how to play it, and a really sweet logo that one of their designers makes. Overall, just seeing the Card Kingdom retail store in person, I went to Seattle about a month ago to check it out. It's an incredible, incredible store. All the polish that they have in the retail environment is so beautiful, and it extends to everything they do, like these battle decks and all, just even the way things are shipped. They're very meticulous about what they do. So if you are watching this and you're a retailer, you own a game store, you would do a lot to learn from Card Kingdom and how they conduct their operations, because they're just some of the best in the game at retail. So, that is Plow the Sands. I've talked for almost half an hour about this deck, and as you can see, I'm so super excited. I get very excitable about Magic cards. Maybe you've noticed by now. So, thank you again for watching. Thank you, John and Damon and Tim at Card Kingdom, for being willing to mail cards to Thailand for me. And I will catch up with you guys in a moment when we talk about Cold Front and Swarm of Scars, and of course, Hour of Devastation 40 card buildings. So, until next time, thank you again for watching. Please leave your feedback. This is still a brand new video series. We've only done a few so far. So we really appreciate the feedback so we can continue making the best videos possible. I'm going to open this guy next and see if it is what I think it is, but you'll have to wait for another video before I do that. Thanks for your time. I always appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.